Hey there. I want to show you something here. Right quick. Just a sec. Let me bring it up. I suppose, I'm really not. I haven't bothered to learn this video editing software, so I gotta kind of do this presentation-wise, kind of like, but I want to show you something. See this here? That is a life jacket that is on a cross, that has been mounted on a cross, a life jacket. And there's another picture here that goes along with that. Let's see, see where it is? It is in the Vatican, as it is a memorial to a refugee that was lost crossing the Mediterranean, trying to escape an injustice and an inhumanity. And the Pope displayed it crucified to remind us of the essential commitment to every human life, because the life of every person is precious in the eyes of God. See, every human life is a portion of God. God took a portion of himself and crafted it into you. So he and the Pope in his Christmas Day message said, "May the Son of God come down to earth from heaven, protect and sustain all those who, due to these and other injustices, are forced to immigrate in the hope of a secure life. It is injustice that makes them cross deserts and seas that become cemeteries. It is injustice that turns them away from places where they might have hope for a dignified life, but instead find them before walls of indifference." And that is our true inhumanity, right there. It all comes back to the this from that thought that I was talking about earlier in a video. This from that thought logic, caused by the rotation of the earth on its axis. And in that it gives you the false impression, and that is the reality of the hominid experience at this point in human history, is that you are all still thinking this from that in your very basic thought, as reinforced by your religion. Your religion is ultimately what is the problem here. It is that dogma, that idea that there is somehow evil in this universe. This from that. In the very nature of that concept, good from evil, right from wrong, light from dark. Now let's take a look at that for a second, shall we? The concept of light and dark. The Christian Bible in Genesis, God says, and he said, "Let there be light." And then he said, and then there's a bit about the separation from day from night. And then it also goes on and on and on, talks about the separation from the wheat from the chaff and all that later on in some text, to try to insinuate that, and it's really what it's showing is it's showing that at its core, the whole the whole dogma is this from that. And that's what's really, obvious. And that is the problem that they have created. It's created a situation to where we now have one of the worst inhumanities in this world. The idea of refugees being turned away by rich countries because they are the them. Comes right down to that. That when put to the test, those who are the haves have denied those who are the have-nots, who seek relocation, justice, and humanity. They seek our humanity. And what have we done? We've turned our back on them. And we've created one of the worst Gestapo-like internal departments the United States government has ever had, in the form of DHS. Seriously. Drop off a letter and change a couple in the, the Nostradamus quatrain scenario, and all of a sudden I bet you we can prove that it was the SS or something. See how all that, this from that thought logic can really create nothing but suffering. And it's reinforced by the them from us idea. In the very basic way, the Bible was getting on about day from night. And so God said, so God's established the day from night thing. But what it says is, also in that very raw way, is that God is like light to the dark. That is a genuine truth. You'll find that upon the plane of death even. That God is like light to the dark. So, when it is to be turned from God, so to speak, when that kind of punishment comes about, if there was ever going to be a punishment, God would just turn you toward the darkness, and that would be all you would then see, even though he would still be connected to you, his hand upon you, just like the world is in front of you, in that very true way. Because you see, God is like light to the dark, and where in this universe do you see the substance of dark in active opposition to the light? As you don't, you can then infer in that very basic way that God's will here is unopposed. And that, we have the foundation for truth in that very real way. So what we have in the pagan side of things, the this from that thought logic side of things, is the idea that there is somehow evil in this universe. I mean, people will believe in evil before they'll believe in God. Seriously. All the Exorcist movies and all them other things. And how some people will, still practice magic and mysticism and all that kind of stuff. Because they are more believing in evil than they do in God. And they believe in this kind of like, they don't actually, even in their heart, I find that some people don't even have the capacity. Because it's all this from that at this point. And to really grab hold of the idea of what is the divine being, it ain't a this from that kind of deal. There isn't a good from evil thing. And as long as you're going to be on that side of it, at the irony that there then develops, if we're going to be all of this and none of that, then we're going to suffer irony all the time. Because divine truth is not this from that. It is this with that. And in that, all people are just. We have to allow everyone to come in order to be a righteous nation. We cannot follow the Trump and criminalize race or poverty or homosexuality or any of the other forms of self-expression that are under the purview of the idea and basic concepts of liberty and the ultimate right to be an individual human being, as so created by God, free of governance and free of religion as governance. Just so we'll know where the future goes. So if you ain't on that side of things, then, well, what righteousness then do you know? You see, there has been a lot of this deception going around about how Christ, specifically the name of Christ, would somehow be with the supremacist, the white nationalist, in the way that the Christian evangelical tries to give that authority, so to speak. They're trying to subvert the word of God and say that Christ is one of them. One of them that wear the mega hat. Because of obviously what? They think Christ is white, do they? Well, push comes to shove and we go back that far, they're going to find that he was not. And he was just who they hate. Because you see, Christ is in the least of these. So he isn't in spirit standing behind Donald Trump in the White House. Christ is with the least of these in immigrant detention. And you think you're somehow righteous just because you have subverted the label of Christian, because you desire a state of governance over humankind, because you have mistakenly brought forth an incorrect interpretation of what our true relationship is with God. And in that, you are an insult to that God for real. And he's calling you out on it pretty clearly, I think. Or will be. So, it all comes down to this. God desires a society of divine equals that he may then live among. Unique individuals. Where every person you meet becomes like an immersion in another culture. And if you don't have the mind and willingness to go that route, then you deny yourself the future. So, God is not Republican. God is not standing behind the Trump. God is not a homophobic evangelical. Quite something else, actually. And that's something they just can't stand. They can't stand that for some reason. I mean, that's why they're jumping in bed with the white nationalists and the fucking Russians and all that stuff, and the Donald Trump people, is because they just can't stand the idea that the Supreme Court has validated gay marriage. And suddenly now, we're the enemy. We're the enemy that they never knew they had. Until just here recently. And it started back in the 70s and 80s, I suppose, but now it's become to the point to where strange bedfellows, to where now we can call them out on it because they're not the ones that are Christian, because they're not being Christian in that at all anymore, as I am here to say, as I think I can prove. But the thing about that is, you don't get to ask questions. Because you see, for me to allow cross-examination of myself would be to submit to someone in authority over me. And none of you have that right, have that authority. Because the manner in which I was created is entirely unique and individual to me and my relationship with God. So, none of you get to ask questions. So with that, I'll see if I'll see you next time.